Now we will go through section 41, power to make rules to supplement this chapter. The state government may make rules requiring the provision in any factory or in any class or description of factories of such further devices and measure for securing the safety of person employed therein, as it may deem necessary. In this section, power is given to the state government to frame rules regarding the safety of the people employed. So if it appears to the state government that certain factory or description of factory require additional safety measures to be taken, then it may frame rules regarding the same. Now we'll go through chapter 4, that is provision related to hazardous process. These provisions are basically related to factory which carry out hazardous process. So this section is all about the factory which are carrying out hazardous process. So we'll go through the section constitution of site appraisal committee. State government may, for the purpose of advising it to consider application for the grant of permission for the initial location of factory involving hazardous process or for expansion of such factory, appoint a site appraisal committee consisting of following members. Now, before giving a permission to a factory which involves hazardous process, a site appraisal committee has to be formed, and the following list of members will be present in the site appraisal committee. So we'll go through each of these members one by one. The following members will be present in the site appraisal committee. So we'll go through them one by one. The first one is that the chief inspector of the state, who shall be its chairman. So the first member will be chairman is the chief inspector, and the following members will be the representative of the central board for the prevention and control of water pollution. Similarly, there will be representative of the central board for prevention and control of air pollution. So these two representatives will be from the central board for water pollution and air pollution respectively. Further to that, there will be representative of the state board for prevention and control of air pollution, and similarly there will be one more member for water pollution. Next is representative of the Department of the Environment in the state. Representative of the Meteorological Department of Government of India. So there will be one member from the Meteorological Department, and there will be one member from an expert in the field of occupational health. So further, there will be one member from representative of the Town Planning Department of the state government. There can be one scientist having specialized knowledge of the hazardous process. Now from the local authority, there will be also representation of the local authority within whose jurisdiction the factory is present. Similarly, not more than 3 other persons as deemed fit by state government shall be present. So as we have seen, there are various members present. There are members from the Inspectorate of Factories, there are members from the Pollution Control Board, Meteorological Department, Town and Planning, similarly the environment, scientist, then occupational health personnel, and there can be maximum other 3 persons who the government might fit for this committee. So we'll go to our next subsection. Now we'll see what a site appraisal committee has to do once they receive an application for initial grant of permission for location of a factory involving hazardous process and for expansion of such factory. So subsection 2. The site appraisal committee shall examine an application for the establishment of factory involving hazardous process and make its recommendation to the state government within a period of 90 days of the receipt of such application in a prescribed form. Now once the site appraisal committee received an application, it shall examine that application. Now as we know that the site appraisal committee consists of various representatives from various government departments. Now each of these representatives has to ensure that the factory is complying within their standard. For example, a state pollution control board representative has to ensure that factory is within its compliance standards. If that is okay, then the recommendation has to be given to the state government within a period of 90 days after the application has been received. Subsection 3. When any process related to a factory owned or controlled by the central government or to a corporation or company owned or controlled by central government, the state government shall co-opt in the site appraisal committee a representative nominated by the central government as a member of that committee. Now as we know that in the following scenarios, if the factory or a process is owned by a central government, then there shall be a representative by the central government in the site appraisal committee. Now, as we know that ONGC, IOCL are some of the example of the central government owned companies. Now, in such cases, there should be a representative of the central government in the site appraisal committee. Subsection 4. The site appraisal committee shall have power to call for any information from the person making an application for the establishment or expansion of factory involving a hazardous process. The site appraisal committee has given the power that if they want or need any information from the applicant regarding the factory or the process, then they can get the same. Subsection 5. When the state government has granted approval to an application for the establishment or expansion of factory involving a hazardous process, it shall not be necessary for an applicant to obtain a further approval from the central board or the state board established under the Water, Air, Prevention and Control of Pollution Act. Now, after the application has been recommended by the site appraisal committee within 90 days to the state government, and if the state government approves the same, then there is no further approval required from the central board or the state board of Water, Air, Prevention and Control of Pollution Act. Now we'll go through section 41B, that is compulsory disclosure of information by the occupier. This section actually applies to all the factories which are involved in hazardous process. So there are a list of things which have to be disclosed to the chief inspector, local authority, general public and the workers, which are mentioned in this section. So we'll go through this section. The occupier of every factory involving a hazardous process shall disclose all information regarding the first one, danger including health hazard and the measures to overcome such hazard to the chief inspector, local authority and general public in the vicinity. Now, if there are any dangers in the factory, similarly there are certain health hazard, and what are the measures that are taken by the occupier and the factory to overcome such hazard shall be disclosed to the chief inspector, the local authority. Local authority may be the panchayat or gram panchayat, okay, or similar such authority, and even the general public in the vicinity. There may be houses surrounding to the factory, so to all these people this information shall be disclosed. The next one, policy with respect to health and safety of the workers to the chief inspector and the local authority. A factory has to make, or the occupier has to make, a health and safety policy at the time of registration of the factory, which involves a hazardous process. This health and safety policy shall be informed to the chief inspector, similarly to the local authority. The next one is the on-site emergency plan and detailed disaster control measures to the chief inspector, workers, general public in the vicinity. Now, on-site emergency plan is a plan, suppose in case there is an emergency in a factory, and what is the role of each and every individual, and how are they going to execute. All this information is included in the on-site emergency plan. It will include a list of people who are important and who have to take decision in case of emergency. Similarly, list of people who are into fire extinguisher, who has undergone a fire extinguisher training. Similarly, a list of people who have undergone a first aid training. Okay, and what are the hazards and what could be the probable accident that could occur. All these are mentioned in the on-site emergency plan. Similarly, detailed disaster control measures. Now, what are the measures in case any disaster occurs? So this measure shall be, all these things shall be informed to the chief inspector, workers and the general public in the vicinity. Now, the inspector has to be informed, can be informed via letter and the report of this. The workers have to be trained, of course, and there should be mock drill conducted, and even the general public, the public awareness program should be conducted so that this public is aware. Even a booklet can be printed and given to them at the time of training or a public awareness program. The next one, nature and detail of the process. Now, whatever the process carried out in a factory, all this detail of the process, especially the process which are hazardous in nature, all this detail has to be shared with the chief inspector. Where any occupier of factory contravenes with the provision and notwithstanding any penalty, license be liable for cancellation. Suppose if any occupier of factory does not follow the above rules or section, then he will have to pay the penalty, and if he doesn't pay the penalty, then his license will be cancelled. The next one, the occupier shall lay down measures for handling, usage and transportation of and storage of hazardous substances inside the factory premises. Now, the information regarding the handling, usage and transportation and storage of hazardous substances in the factory shall be shared with the chief inspector, workers and the general public in the vicinity, so that they are aware, and in case an accident occur, they are already mentally prepared for that thing and they will be ready to act accordingly. So now we'll conclude this subsection that it says that's compulsory disclosure of information by the occupier. Now in this we'll conclude that the following information has to be disclosed by the occupier. The one is the hazard and the measures to overcome that hazard. Second one is the policy, health and safety policy. Third one is the on-site emergency plan. Fourth one are the details of the processes, hazardous processes, and the measures or the SOP regarding the handling, usage, transportation and storage of hazardous substances. Okay, this has to be shared with the chief inspector, local authority, public in the vicinity and the workers. So we'll move on to the next section. Now we'll go through section 41C, that is specific responsibility of the occupier in relation to hazardous process. So in this section we will see what are the specific responsibility of the occupier related to hazardous process. So we'll go through this one by one. The first one, every occupier of factory involving in a hazardous process shall maintain accurate and up-to-date health record, medical record. So this record has to be maintained and the medical test for the same has to be carried out from a recognized party. So there are two types of tests. One is the pre-employment medical test, which is carried out before a person joins a factory, and second one is the periodical, which is carried out after the person is involved in a hazardous process, and it has to be carried out at an interval not exceeding 1 year or 12 months. Clause B, appoint person who possesses qualification and experience in handling hazardous substance and are competent to supervise such handling. Now only a person who has got the qualification and experience, who has got knowledge and experience in handling hazardous substance, only such person shall be appointed in supervising handling of such hazardous substance. Clause C, medical examination of worker. Now in two cases the medical examination of worker has to be carried out. The first one, before such worker is assigned job involving working with hazardous substance. So before he is given the task of handling hazardous substance, his medical examination has to be carried out. Similarly, after he has ceased to work such job at interval not exceeding 12 months, even after he has stopped doing work related to hazardous process or substance, he has to be medically examined at interval not exceeding 12 months. So within 1 year his medical examination has to be carried out. Now we will go through section 41D, that is power of central government to appoint an inquiry committee. Now in case of an extraordinary situation involving factory engaged in a hazardous process, there is power with the central government to appoint an inquiry committee. Now we will go through this subsection. The government will appoint an inquiry committee to inquire into the standards of health and safety, to find out the root cause of the failure or neglect in adoption of any measures or standard prescribed for the health and safety of the worker, general public affected. Similarly, for the prevention and recurrence of such extraordinary situation in future in such factory or elsewhere. Now what is the reason for the central government to appoint an inquiry committee is that they want to find out the root cause why factory involved in hazardous process did not adopt the standard which was prescribed for health and safety. Even they want to prevent such extraordinary situation from occurring in future in that factory or elsewhere. So this is the reason why the government appoints an inquiry committee. Clause 2. The committee appointed shall consist of chairman and 2 members. So the committee will consist of 1 chairman and 2 other members. Similarly, third one, the recommendation of the committee shall be advisory in nature. The committee will only advise on the matter related to health and safety, and the implementation lies with the factory. Now we will go through section 41E, that is emergency standard. Now in this section we will learn that the central government can direct certain institution to lay down emergency standard. So we will go through the subsection 1, where the central government is satisfied that standards so prescribed are inadequate, then it may direct the DG Fastly or other institution to lay down emergency standard. Now if the government finds that the standard of safety laid down for the hazardous process are not adequate and additional standards are required, then will direct the DG Fastly or any other institution which is related to standards in hazardous process to lay down emergency standards. Subsection 2. The emergency standard laid down shall be enforceable and have the same effect as if they have been incorporated in the rules made under this Act. Now, the emergency standard which have been laid down shall be followed by the factory which involves hazardous process, because it has the same effect as if they are the rules or incorporated in the rules. Now we'll go through section 41F, that is permissible limit of exposure of chemical and toxic substance. In a factory there are various kinds of chemical being used. A person can be exposed to a particular chemical for certain concentration only for a particular amount of time. Above this it will affect its health. So there shall be a permissible limit above which a person shall not be exposed to any chemical or toxic substance. Similarly, if there is any change in the permissible limit, government has to amend the same. So this is what we are going to see in this section. Subsection 1. The maximum permissible threshold limit of exposure of chemical and toxic substance in manufacturing process shall be of the value indicated in the second schedule. So in the second schedule of the Factory Act, all the permissible limit of all the chemicals which are hazardous or toxic in nature has been mentioned, and a person shall not be exposed to this chemical above the values mentioned in this second schedule. Similarly, the central government may at the time by notification in official gazette make suitable changes in the said schedule. Now if there is any scientific research on this and the values have been changed, the same government has to amend in the schedule by notification in the official gazette.